Chapter 1: The Flickering Star. The light dimmed without warning. Commander Jax Reynard stood on the observation deck of Sentinel Prime, the largest colony hub on the edge of the galaxy, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The distant star that had given the system its name now flickered unnaturally, as if fighting for its last breaths. Streams of crimson and gold licked out in jagged bursts, painting the barren landscape in shades of dread. Jax tightened his grip on the railing. Below, the colony stirred like an anthill under siege. Alarms wailed, evacuation shuttles hissed with steam, and frantic voices filled the comms. Yet his eyes stayed on the star. A commander knew when trouble wasn't just brewing. It was roaring toward them like a tidal wave. Behind him, a voice cut through the tension, sharp and urgent. "Commander, we've got worse news." Jax turned. Dr. Mira Anselm approached, her dark braids swaying with each purposeful step. She held a data pad, her knuckles pale from the tight grip. Myra's expression, usually hardened by years of dispassionate calculations, betrayed a flicker of fear. "It's accelerating," she said, shoving the data pad into his hands. Numbers and waveforms scrolled across the screen. The star's instability wasn't supposed to reach critical for another 50 years. But this, she jabbed at a sharp spike on the display. "This is artificial." "Artificial?" Jax's voice was calm, but his stomach tightened. Mira nodded, her voice lowering. "Someone or something is forcing the collapse. The energy spikes are too precise to be natural." Before he could respond, the deck lights flickered, then steadied. The PA system crackled as Lieutenant Soren Vega's voice came through, tight with urgency. "Commander, we've got incoming. Fleet signature. Unknown origin." Jax set the datapad down and strode to the central console. The holographic display lit up, showing the system's outer perimeter. A cluster of ships was moving toward the colony. Their silhouettes were jagged and alien, unlike anything Jax had seen in his decades of service. "How many?" "Too many," Soren replied. "And they're not answering hails." Mira crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "So, not just sabotage. This is an invasion." "Looks like it," Jax muttered, his jaw tightening. He keyed the comms. "All stations, this is Commander Reynard. Prepare for immediate defensive action. Evacuation protocols Gamma 5 are now in effect. Prioritize civilians and essential personnel. Combat teams to your stations." The colony erupted into controlled chaos. Orders barked through the comms. The hum of engines filled the air as shuttles prepared for launch. Jax glanced at Mira. "You're with me? If this is artificial, I need you to figure out how they're doing it. And if I can't," she asked, "then we make sure they can't finish the job." The command center buzzed with activity. Technicians manned consoles, their hands flying over controls as data poured in from the colony's defense grid. Soren stood near the holographic table, his arms crossed. His flight suit clung to him like a second skin, the patch on his shoulders still scuffed from their last skirmish. "What do we know about them?" Jax asked as he entered. "Not much," Soren admitted. He tapped the display, magnifying the alien fleet. "Their ships don't match any known designs. No comm chatter, no demands, just a straight line to us." Mira leaned over the console, studying the ships. "They're positioned too perfectly for random invaders. They knew we'd be here. They want the star?" Jax frowned. "Why?" "Because it's dying," Mira said. "If they can harness its energy as it collapses, they could build a weapon powerful enough to destroy entire systems. And they'll take us with it." Soren snorted. "Great. A bunch of intergalactic vultures." Jax's voice cut through the tension. "Focus. How do we stop them?" Mira hesitated. "The star is already unstable. If we can destabilize it further, force an early collapse, we might deny them their prize." "But the fallout," she trailed off, her meaning clear. "The colony won't survive," Jax finished grimly. "Neither will they," Mira said softly. A tense silence settled over the room. The only sound was the hum of the holographic display, showing the alien ships growing closer. Jax looked at Soren. "Get your squadron ready. We need eyes on those ships, and if you see an opening, take it." "Mira, you're with me. Let's figure out if there's another way. Minutes later, Jax and Mira stood in the observatory, staring at the flickering star. The room was quiet, save for the distant hum of the colony's life support systems. I don't like this, Jax admitted. Mira glanced at him. The plan? The situation, he said. We're fighting blind. No idea who they are, what they want, or how to stop them. I hate that. Mira managed a faint smile. Welcome to science. Half of our job is guessing until we're right. Jack smirked despite himself. Comforting, the moment was interrupted by Soren's voice over the comms. Commander, we've got movement. Their lead ship just launched something. What kind of something? Jax asked. Not sure, but it's big, and it's headed straight for us. Jax's stomach dropped. He turned to Mira. Time to guess fast. To be continued. Chapter 2, The Warden's Gambit. The alien projectile loomed large on the colony's central display, its jagged silhouette cutting through the void like a serrated blade. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. Commander Jax Reynard stood at the forefront of the command center, his presence a steadying force against the rising tension. The holographic table projected the object in unsettling detail, highlighting its uneven, crystalline structure that pulsed faintly with light. What is that thing? Soren Vega's voice broke through the heavy silence. The lieutenant leaned over the console, his brow furrowed. A missile? A drone? Dr. Mira Anselm answered without looking up from her own analysis. Neither. It's an emitter. It's broadcasting. Something. Broadcasting what? Jax asked. Myra's fingers flew over her datapad, decrypting the alien signals pouring in. Energy waves, intense, focused. If I'm right, it's destabilizing the star even faster. They're not waiting for a natural collapse. They're forcing it. Jax's jaw tightened. Options? Soren straightened. We shoot it down before it gets closer. Simple. Not simple, Mira interjected. If we destroy it without understanding how it works, we could trigger the very collapse we're trying to stop. That thing is tied directly to the star's core dynamics. One wrong move, and we could accelerate the entire system's death. A tense silence followed, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the command center's systems. We need more intel, Jax decided. His voice was steady, though the weight of the decision pressed on him like a physical force. Soren, take your squadron. Get in close, but don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Mira, I need you working on a countermeasure. If they want to use the star against us, we'll make sure it turns on them instead. Soren grinned, the glint of a fighter pilot's confidence flashing in his eyes. Finally, some action. Keep your head, Lieutenant, Jax warned. This isn't a glory run. The sleek silhouettes of Soren's squadron broke away from the colony's defensive perimeter, their engines igniting with a low, throaty roar. Inside his cockpit, Soren adjusted his targeting systems, his hands steady on the controls. The alien emitter grew larger on his display, its crystalline surface pulsating with an unnatural rhythm. This thing's alive, Soren muttered into his comms. Define alive, came the reply from Lieutenant Ferris, his wingman. It's growing, Soren clarified, expanding with each pulse. It's feeding off the star's energy. Can you confirm, Vega? Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Confirmed, Commander, Soren replied. Whatever this thing is, it's designed to accelerate the collapse exponentially. Understood. Maintain observation. Do not engage unless provoked. Copy that. As Soren's squadron maneuvered closer, the emitter suddenly responded. Panels on its crystalline surface shifted, exposing jagged apertures that began to glow with a menacing light. Commander, it's reacting to us, Soren reported, his voice tightening. Pull back, Jax ordered immediately. But the emitter had already unleashed its retaliation. Beams of energy erupted from its surface, slicing through the void. Soren banked hard, his fighter narrowly dodging a blast that scorched the edge of his wing. We're under fire, Ferris yelled. Soren, disengage. Jax barked over the comms. Not yet, Soren growled, weaving through the emitter's assault. We got its attention. If we pull back now, it'll refocus on the colony. Soren's squadron split into evasive maneuvers, their agile fighters darting through the beams. Soren himself pushed his fighter to its limits, his focus unyielding. "I've got an idea," he said, his tone sharp with determination. "Mira, you still on the line?" "Go ahead," Mira replied, her voice tight with concentration. "Can your readings pick up a weak spot on this thing? Someplace I can hit without blowing us all to hell." There was a pause as Myra's system scanned the emitter structure. "There," she said finally. "It's a vent on the underside. If you hit it at the right angle, you might disrupt its energy cycle without detonating it." "Might?" Soren asked, his grin audible. "Don't get cocky, Vega," Jax interjected. "Take the shot and get out of there." Soren's fighter looped around, dodging another blast. The emitter's vent came into view, a faint seam in its crystalline armor. He lined up his targeting systems, his breath steady despite the chaos around him. "Come on," he muttered, his finger hovering over the trigger. With a burst of precision fire, the vent erupted in a cascade of sparks. The emitter's beams faltered, its glowing apertures dimming as its energy cycle destabilized. "Direct hit," Ferris cheered. "Soren, pull back now," Jax ordered. Soren didn't need to be told twice. He banked hard, his engines screaming as the emitter began to collapse in on itself. His fighter raced back toward the colony as the emitter exploded in a brilliant flash, scattering shards of crystal into the void. Back in the command center, Jax exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good work, Soren. Get your squadron back here for debriefing." "On our way," Soren replied, a trace of pride in his voice. Mira, however, wasn't celebrating. She stared at her data pad, her expression dark. "What is it?" Jax asked. "That emitter wasn't their main play," she said quietly. "It was just a distraction." "Distraction for what?" Before she could answer, the room shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the central display lit up with a new threat. A massive alien vessel emerging from behind the star, its size dwarfing anything they'd seen before. "They wanted us focused on the emitter," Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "So we wouldn't notice that." Jax's expression hardened as the vessel's jagged form filled the display. "Looks like we got their attention now." To be continued. Chapter 3, Into the Heart of the Storm. The alien vessel's silhouette loomed like a monolith of despair, casting a shadow over the colony's orbital defenses. The air in the command center was thick with tension, punctuated by the low hum of alert sirens. Jax Reynard stood at the center of the chaos, his eyes locked on the holographic projection of the behemoth ship. Its jagged surface bristled with weapon arrays and shimmering shields. He could almost feel its malevolent intent radiating through the void. "Mira," Jax said, his voice steady but urgent. "Tell me you've got something." Mira Anselm didn't look up, her focus glued to the streams of data cascading across her console. "Its energy signature is off the charts. If we hit it head-on, we'll barely scratch the shields. They've engineered this thing to withstand everything we can throw at it." "Not helpful, Doc," Soren Vega chimed in, his voice crackling over the comms from his fighter cockpit. "We need a weak spot, not a eulogy." "Working on it," Mira snapped back, her fingers dancing over the controls. Jax turned to Soren's holofeed, the fighter pilot's cockpit bathed in dim red light. "Vega, maintain your position. Don't engage until we have a plan." "Understood, Commander," Soren replied, though the frustration in his tone was palpable. The room shuddered as the alien vessel unleashed a preliminary volley. Explosions lit up the colony's defensive grid, and a tremor rippled through the station. "Shields holding, but barely," a tactical officer reported, her voice strained. "We don't have time to wait," Jax muttered, his mind racing. He turned to Mira. "How long until they overrun us?" Mira hesitated. 10 minutes. Maybe less." In the void beyond, Soren's squadron maintained a loose formation, their fighters dwarfed by the alien ship's sheer scale. He gripped his controls tightly, his knuckles white as he stared at the monstrosity before him. "Any day now, Commander," Soren muttered under his breath. Then, Myra's voice cut through the comms. "I've got it." The command center's display shifted, zooming in on the alien vessel. Mira highlighted a section near its aft, a pulsating core partially exposed beneath layers of overlapping armor. It's a thermal vent, she explained, her words tumbling out in a rush. They're channeling the star's energy directly into their systems. If we can disrupt the flow, it could destabilize the entire ship. And by disrupt, you mean blow it up, Soren said, a grin creeping into his voice. Jax's eyes narrowed as he studied the projection. What's the catch? The vent is heavily shielded, and it's only exposed intermittently, Mira replied. You'll need perfect timing to get a shot in, and even then, it'll take a concentrated strike. Soren's grin widened. Perfect timing is my specialty. Don't get cocky, Jax warned. This isn't a solo run. Ferris, your wingman, will back you up. Understood, Commander, Ferris replied, his voice steady. Soren and Ferris broke formation, their fighters accelerating toward the alien ship. The rest of the squadron provided cover, drawing fire away from the two as they maneuvered through the barrage. The alien vessel responded with a relentless stream of energy blasts. Soren's fighter dipped and rolled, narrowly avoiding a beam that scorched past him. Ferris, stay on my 6, Soren ordered. Right behind you, Ferris confirmed. The thermal vent came into view, glowing with a dangerous intensity. Soren activated his targeting system, his HUD locking onto the exposed section. Mira, how long until the shields drop again? Soren asked. 5 seconds, she replied. Marking the window now. Soren's pulse quickened as he counted down. He steadied his aim, waiting for the exact moment. Now! Myra's voice rang out. Soren fired his plasma cannons, sending a concentrated burst toward the vent. Ferris followed suit, their combined firepower slamming into the exposed core. The vent erupted in a cascade of sparks and flames, the alien vessel shuddering violently as the energy flow destabilized. Direct hit, Ferris shouted. Not done yet, Soren said, banking hard to avoid the ship's flailing defenses. Back in the command center, Myra's reading spiked. The destabilization is spreading, she reported. But they're compensating. If we don't hit it again, they'll regain control. Jax leaned forward, his jaw tight. Soren, you got one more shot. Make it count. Copy that, Soren replied, looping back for another pass. The alien vessel's defenses intensified, its weapons locking onto Soren's fighter. Beams of energy crisscrossed his path, forcing him into a series of sharp, evasive maneuvers. I can't hold them off much longer, Ferris yelled, his fighter taking a glancing hit. Hang in there, Soren said through gritted teeth. He lined up his shot, the vent glowing brighter as the core destabilized further. This is it, Soren muttered. He fired, a searing blast of plasma striking the vent dead center. The core imploded, sending shockwaves rippling through the alien vessel. Its shields faltered, and its weapons fell silent. Soren, get out of there! Jax's voice cut through the comms. Soren pulled back, his engines roaring as the alien ship began to collapse inward. The massive vessel imploded, a blinding burst of light consuming it entirely. In the aftermath, the command center erupted in cheers. But Jax's focus remained on the holographic display, his expression grim. Soren? Ferris? Status? Alive and kicking, Soren replied, his voice shaky but triumphant. Barely, Ferris added. Mira slumped back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. It's over. Jax shook his head. Not yet. That was just one ship. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. The room fell silent as his words sank in. For now, they had won, but the war was far from over. To be continued. Chapter For the Price of Victory. The remnants of the alien vessel's explosion faded into the vast darkness of space, leaving a glowing trail of debris. Soren's fighter drifted in orbit, its hull scorched and sensors flickering. The adrenaline of survival ebbed, leaving only the weight of the mission's toll. Ferris, you still with me? Soren asked, his voice hoarse. Barely, Ferris replied, coughing over the comms. Engines fried, shields gone. But I'm breathing. Good enough for now, Soren said. He switched frequencies. Command, targets neutralized. We're coming back. If this bird can still fly. In the colony's command center, Jax closed his eyes for a brief moment, the relief palpable. Around him, the crew exchanged quiet smiles and exhausted nods. But Jax knew better than to celebrate just yet. "Mira," Jax said, his voice cutting through the hum of equipment. "Already scanning," Mira replied, her fingers moving over her console. The holographic display shifted, revealing a series of energy signatures rippling on the far edge of the system. Her face paled. "Commander, you're not going to like this." Jax stepped closer to the display, his jaw tightening. More ships. Dozens of them. Their configurations varied, but unmistakably alien. "They're regrouping," Mira said, her voice a whisper. Jax exhaled sharply. "We don't have the firepower for this. Not after that fight." Soren's voice crackled over the comms. "Did you say more ships? Tell me that's a glitch, Commander." "No glitch," Jax said grimly. "And we can't fight them head-on. Not like this." Minutes later, the command center was a hive of frantic activity. The survivors of the first battle patched up systems, rerouted power, and prepared for what seemed like inevitable destruction. Mira worked furiously at her station, sweat beading her brow. "There's one chance," she said, not looking up. Jax leaned over her shoulder. "I'm listening." "They're funneling through a single jump gate," Mira explained, pulling up a schematic of the system. "If we overload the gate's nexus, we can collapse it, cut them off before they reach us. And the downside?" She hesitated. "It'll take everything we've got. We'll have to drain the station's core to pull it off. That means no shields, no weapons, nothing. And if the overload doesn't work, we're sitting ducks," Jax finished for her. "It's the only way," Mira said, meeting his gaze. Jax straightened and turned to the room. "You heard her. Prep for a full power transfer. And get me Vega." In his battered cockpit, Soren's heart sank at the new orders. "You want me to what?" "You'll be our eyes out there," Jax explained. "We need a precise delivery to overload the Nexus. You're the only pilot with enough experience to pull it off." Soren let out a low whistle. "You're asking me to dive into an active jump gate with a ticking bomb strapped to my ship. Do you hear how crazy that sounds?" "I do," Jax said. "But you've pulled off worse." There was a long pause. Then Soren sighed. "Fine, but if I make it back, you owe me the biggest drink of my life." "I'll make it too," Jax said with a faint smile. "Good luck out there, Vega." As Soren's fighter sped toward the glowing Nexus, the tension in the command center reached a fever pitch. The gate shimmered like a molten wound in space, pulsing with unearthly energy. Beyond it, the alien fleet loomed, their advance unrelenting. Myra's voice guided Soren through the comms. "Stay on target. You'll need to release the payload at the exact center of the vortex." "No pressure," Soren muttered. The fighter's alarms blared as the alien fleet took notice. Streams of plasma fire lanced toward him, the air around his cockpit crackling with static. He wove through the chaos, his focus unyielding. "Almost there," Mira said, her voice tight with anticipation. Soren clenched his jaw as he approached the vortex. The fighter system screamed warnings, but he pressed on, the gate's energy enveloping his ship. "Now!" Mira shouted. Soren released the payload, a volatile energy core rigged to detonate on impact. He veered sharply, his fighter shaking violently as the gate began to destabilize. The core detonated in a blinding flash, the vortex collapsing in on itself. A shockwave rippled outward, swallowing the leading edge of the alien fleet. Soren's fighters spiraled out of control, systems failing as the explosion consumed the void around him. Back at the station, the command center erupted in cheers as the alien fleet vanished from the scanners. But the relief was short-lived. "Mira," Jax said urgently, "do we have Vega's signal?" Myra's hands flew over her console. "I'm trying." A faint blip appeared on the screen. Soren's fighter, drifting near the wreckage of the gate. "He's alive!" Mira exclaimed. "Get him back," Jax ordered. Hours later, Soren was pulled from his cockpit, battered but alive. He stood unsteadily, his grin defiant. "Made it," he said, his voice hoarse. "You always do," Jax replied, clapping him on the shoulder. As the crew celebrated, Mira leaned against her console, exhaustion etched into her face. We bought ourselves time, she said softly. Jax nodded. Time to prepare. Because they'll be back. He looked out at the stars, his expression resolute. Humanity had proven its resilience, but the fight was far from over. For now, they had survived. And that was enough. End of part 1.